Good afternoon and welcome to EuroSTAR Webinar Week. Our second webinar is presented by Nancy Kelln of Unimagined Testing, and she will speak about leading business testers. My name is Miriam and I will be moderating this webinar. Today's webinar will last approximately 25 minutes with time for questions at the end. If you want to ask a question, use the Q&A button on your live meeting toolbar or press Alt and Q on your keyboard. This webinar will also be recorded and will be available in our webinar archive shortly. When tweeting about this webinar, please make sure you use the hashtag ESConf, that's ESCONFS, so we can find and answer any questions you may have. So now I will hand you over to Nancy and we can get started on today's topic. Good afternoon, Nancy.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone who's attending today. It's great to have everyone online. Just a bit about me. I've been leading business testers for about 5 years now. I've worked with various teams that have been a combination of testers and business testers, as well as teams that have just been comprised completely of just business testers with myself in a coordinator or lead role. And this presentation looks at the experiences I've had and some of the key learnings that I've had to share with other people that may be in somewhat of a similar role, dealing as a test coordinator with a team of business testers and not quite sure what to do with this different group of individuals we have that we have to lead through the testing process. So let's get started. So today's agenda, we're going to look at what business testers are, look at why projects use business testers, run through a few facts about business testers and leading the business test teams, and then look at some of the benefits to yourself as the coordinator or the senior member of the team in leading business testers, and then a quick summary. So just a bit of humor here on my disclaimer. This topic, we can't possibly focus on everything in the 30 minutes that I have today, but we're going to look at some of the key successes and challenges that I've had through my own experience, and this may differ depending on your environment as to how much you can use this or how little you can. But I always welcome questions at the end of this, or even reach out to me after the presentation and ask me any questions that you may have. I don't mind at all. So let's have a look at, if we can just flip back to the other slide. There we go. What a business tester is. Too many clicks there. So business testers are people that have been seconded from a business division of the company. So this may be somebody that's not typically on a project or in the IT group, but they may be brought in to be part of the project team or may just be working on the peripheral to provide some support. And they're mainly brought in to test their product, either through UAT or through even other test cycles. And they're likely not a professional tester. And this is where a lot of your role as the test coordinator comes in to help them understand what it is they're going to be needing to do on this project. So just to set some ground here on what I'm calling a business tester so that we're all on the same page as we talk through the presentation today. So who are business testers? Well, they can come from various areas of the organization. In the projects I've run, I've seen business testers come from our end user group, so people that are using our product day to day as an end user. I've also seen it come from subject matter experts. So these may be people that are very knowledgeable in the field, but not necessarily using the product all the time. So specifically, if we're looking with a very scientific application or medical application, we may have a doctor or a nurse who's very knowledgeable in that area, but may not be one of the end users of our product. We also have super users, and by these people I mean people that are end users, but are often the go-to person in their area. So they know the software really, really well and are often supporting other members of their business area. We may have people from call centers or technical support who work with the product in a support-type role, but don't necessarily use it the way our end users do. Some organizations have even seen us having co-op students or intern students, people that just come in for a few months, help out the business, and then leave again. And it's important to know who our business testers are because each of these different people are going to bring a different background to their testing. A business end user will have a lot of business end user knowledge, but may not know the product as well, where a subject matter expert may know the material well, but not the product. So understanding where these people come from is going to help you with your plan and your strategy because you're going to know who you can leverage in what areas and where you may have some gaps, especially if you have a group of interns who don't know your business, who don't know your product. It's going to be a lot more difficult for you as a test coordinator to work with a group like that. So really understanding who they are so we know how to use them. So now I'd like to do the poll question if we could. So why do our organizations add business testers? So I've seen a lot of different organizations add them for various reasons, and I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to vote on why they think businesses use business testers. So we have 2 people so far. A few more now. So we have 50%, 53% of the people saying for UAT. We have also got some people saying for industry-specific knowledge, for time frame and budget. Oh, and one that says that they don't understand the value of testing. Oh, they've changed their mind on that one. It went back to 0. Okay. Thank you for that, everyone. So yes, typically we add business testers for a UAT phase of testing. We'll bring people in at that point to run through our user acceptance testing, get their feedback on the product just before go live. But on teams where we have business testers throughout the entire project, and specifically ones where you may be the only test professional on the team, and you've got an entire team comprised of solely business people, there's often reasons that organizations will do this. Sometimes it's time frame. So organizations are feeling the pressure to do testing, don't have a lot of time to ramp up additional resources, and want to just augment the testing team with business people. Sometimes it's budget. The projects can't simply afford to bring in extra people. They don't have the budget to pay that, so they're going to use their business people to fulfill that gap. Sometimes it's industry-specific knowledge. So in the example I gave earlier, the medical devices or electrical or an engineering application, they may bring in specific people from the industry. One project that I'd worked on was an electrical control system, and we needed electrical engineers to understand quite a bit of that product. So we needed to bring these people in so that we could have their knowledge of engineering and electrical engineering specifically to do the testing. Another reason is some organizations bring in business testers because they don't understand the value of testing. They don't realize the important skills that a tester can bring to their project, and testing may just be an audit requirement that they want to fulfill. And understanding why organizations bring in business testers can help you with the project as well. Leading business testers, unfortunately, sometimes can be frustrating because you don't have specific testing skills on your team, but knowing why your organization has chosen to do this can help with the frustration because you know that it's not going to be able to change because we simply don't have budget, or we simply need these people because of their industry-specific knowledge. So working within reasons of why can help us lead a more successful team. So if you're working on a team that has business testers and you're not sure why your organization has decided to staff in this way, do some asking around just to find out so that it's better, it helps you lead the project a little bit better. So let's look at some facts about business testers that I've gleaned from leading the test teams that I have over the last few years. Because understanding the facts helps set us up for successful testing. So our first fact, even though we call them business testers, they're not professional testers. This presents a few challenges. They likely don't understand or aren't interested in understanding testing terms or approaches or practices, so you can't assume that they'll know what a regression test is or what a system test is or integration test, so we need to work within that. They likely don't think like a tester. Although I have seen some business people that have become amazing testers, but out of the gate, they're not going to think like a tester, so they're going to require some help with that. And they may not appreciate the complexity of testing, or they may be intimidated by it. I've seen some business testers come in and say, oh, this will be easy. I'm just going to have to click on a few things and tell you where the problems are, and I should be done in no time. Or on the other hand, they may be feeling like they've been brought in, they need to find all of the issues with the product, and they don't know that they are feeling comfortable with that or have the skills to do that. So they may be very intimidated by the fact that they're now having to test. But some considerations are that they have a unique domain knowledge that you're going to want to leverage. They may not understand testing, but hopefully if you've received people from the business that are subject matter experts or business super users, they've got a unique knowledge that they can share and bring to your project. And they're going to exercise the system in the same way that they do every day. They're going to use it as a true user, if that's what their role is. And you'll see how they work with the system, and it'll show you some problems. As opposed to a tester that's just using a persona or wearing a hat of a business tester. You actually have a business tester that you can leverage. The second fact is they don't necessarily want to be testers. They have a full-time career in whatever area of the business that they've come from. Some of them may have gone to school for this or studied quite hard for this, and they don't want to switch and become a tester now. They may have been voluntold or picked from their team by their lead and said, we have this testing requirement we need. You're going to go test for a few months on this project. So they may not want to be a tester, and they likely view their role as a business tester as a temporary assignment. So knowing this, we don't want to start training these people to be testers, and I've fallen into this trap myself. Got my business testers together, started to train them on all of the industry standard terms for testing. What is a regression test? What does a test script look like? How do we do exploratory testing? And I haven't been successful when I've tried to do that. But I've also learned that I don't need to train them to be testers. I should leverage their unique business perspective that they bring and their knowledge that they bring to my team and start to learn to share a common language that they understand. I've heard all sorts of various terms for various types of testing, ones that I've never seen anywhere when I've tried to Google them on the Internet. And they were terms that my business organization had for the type of testing that they did. And when they used these terms, everyone understood what it meant and what it meant that they had to do. The only person was me, the outsider, that didn't understand. They started to learn to share a common language, use the terminology that they're familiar with, and fit what I believe into that terminology. It was much easier than trying to retrain them to think of different terms for things that they already had terms for. It made me a lot more successful not trying to train them than to just work with what I had and bring them to where I needed them to be. The third fact is that they're going to require a lot of guidance and support. So if you have them for just the UAT phase, we're probably a little bit familiar with leading that. But if we've got testers that have been brought in to work for the entire project, so they're the only testers you're going to have on the team, they're the only people that will be testing the product aside from yourself who's leading the initiative, they're going to require a lot of guidance when they're going to be having to do with the scope, the approach, and the execution for testing. And we'll see in a few slides in next how we do that. But while we're giving the guidance and support, it's going to require a lot of your time, but it's a great opportunity to see how your business users use their software, how they interact with it. You're going to build some great relationships while you're helping these people. You're going to gain unique insight into the expectations for your software. They're going to show you what they expect of it, hands-on, first person, rather than getting this from the business analyst or third party through your project manager. You're going to see right from your users how they use the software. And then give them guidance as they're using it as to how to test it, how to get the approach and the scope for your testing. The fourth fact is they're going to require some expectation management. So those are the product as well as the expectations for yourself and for them. Let's start first with the product. I've had business test teams come in right after we've received our product from development, and I haven't prepared them for what they're going to see. And for me, this resulted in a lot of panic on my team. My business testers started to worry that the product had just come from development, and I understood that that meant that we would see a lot of problems, but I hadn't communicated that well to them. So when they started testing, a lot of things didn't work, which is what I fully expected, but they had expected to receive a product that would be completely working, completely finished. So we had a bit of a disconnect where they were really concerned about what they saw, but I had fully expected it. So I've now learned that I need to set expectations of what they can expect of the product. I need to remind them that we're going to see some quality issues, maybe some stability issues. I want to talk to them about where I expect to see problems, which part of the product I consider to be more stable, which part of the product I consider to be less stable, and which areas that may not even be done yet, especially if you're working on an agile team where you're getting an iteration and different different sprints ending and getting a good product at each of those sprints. There's going to be full sections that may not be completed. And to get your business testers to understand, here's what they're going to see, here's what it's going to look like, here's where we expect to find problems, and remind them that they're part of the team to help find these problems. We want them to be looking at the product, determining that there's issues with it, and then having their help to find where these problems are. Because the earlier we find them, the easier it is to fix them, hopefully, and the more likely they are to be fixed on release. And just to remind them of those expectations and set that for them. Also have to set expectations about the work that we require from them, about how much time there may take to test, how complex it may be, and the requirements they may have for doing a full-time job and the testing. Just to set some expectations of when we expect them to be helping us and when we will be helping them, which is basically the whole way along, that they've got our support throughout the whole project and all of the testing that they'll be doing. Just to set those up front so that you don't have any surprises is always an important thing to remember. The fifth fact is that oftentimes our business testers may still have a full-time job. They're likely not 100% allocated, and even if we're told they're 100% allocated, I've noticed that they've got constant distractions from their full-time job that they've left. Either they're still actually committed, where they're told, well, you have 100% allocation to this testing project, but we still may need your help to answer some questions. Or they may be emotionally tied to the back of their job. They want to know how things are going while they're away, how their people are doing, how the things that they were working on are still going. So they're likely still touching base with wherever they've come from the business. And they're going to need support, even here, because you may need to work with your project manager or their manager to free up their time if they're being pulled back quite a bit and it's impacting their work or it's causing them concern. You also have to remember that they likely don't report to you or the project manager of the project. So you're not going to be able to manage these people. You're going to have to influence them instead. Convince them to do the testing through influencing rather than managing and mandating it. And if you find that they're starting to be pulled back too much and it is impacting the project or the plan that you had, you're going to have to work through your project manager or their manager to change the expectations for testing and really highlight that through the risks that it presents to the project. And be realistic about their other commitments. Even if you're told that they're 100% allocated, they may not be. So working to clarify what that'll be up front and then having some channels for communicating when they're pulled away for other assignments. How are you going to deal with that? Talk to your project manager about this when you feel it starts to become a risk or even before, so that they are aware that this is impacting their project and they can take some steps to change it if it becomes a problem. Seen in some organizations where they really have freed up the business people and have done quite a good job. I've seen in others where my time has really been restricted down just based on the needs of the business because operating the production system may become a priority rather than this project that's changing it. So just to really work with your project manager to help balance that for you is a real win that I found here. So how do we set our teams up for success? And I have a picture of my son playing soccer on this slide because it really came to me one day while watching one of his soccer games. The team that he was on was a bunch of 5-year-old boys who had never played soccer before. So they were really out of their element when it came to playing this game of soccer that they had not much heard of or seen, but were really keen to try because they're little boys and they like things that are balls and outside and running around. And their coach had never coached before. He was one of the dads of one of the kids on the team and was really struggling with coaching. But since I'd never played soccer, I didn't understand what he was doing wrong. I just saw that what he was doing wasn't working. So we went to one game one night, and I'd watched the other coach. And she was really tough on these little 5-year-olds. She was running them through drills, and they were doing all kinds of really great coaching stuff. But for me, I was really surprised thinking, they're only 5, and she's really working them quite hard. And then I looked back to my son's coach, and he had given each of the kids a ball and shown them how to kick it, and they'd run around with each with their balls, and they seemed to be having fun. When I compared the two teams, I thought, well, she was really tough and really hard on them, but none of them seemed to complain, and they were all taking part. But for 5-year-olds, she was really working them. Where my team was kind of doing their own thing, kicking the balls, running around, and seemed to be having a good time. So when the game had started, my coach went and took away all the balls from his team, and a few of the kids looked a little puzzled. They had a ball, and now their ball was gone, and they couldn't understand why. Where the other coach's team, when she said, okay, let's get started, they all ran out in the field, they knew where they needed to stand, and they were ready to go. Where my team was just standing around looking confused because they had balls, and now the balls were gone, and they didn't know what to do. So my coach had to go out there and position everyone and remind them kind of, oh, yeah, here's what we're going to do now. But none of them were really prepared. And when the game started, the other coach's team knew what to do. They knew how to pass the ball. They knew where to run. They knew where to shoot. Well, my team was standing there really confused, not sure what to do. And that was a real aha moment for me because I was doing the same thing with my business testers. I'd given them a bunch of templates, told them kind of how to fill them out, and then sent them away to do the work on their own. And they were confused and didn't know what to do. Well, if I would have been running drills and working with them on things and really holding their hands through it all, they would have been better set up for success. Here's what we're going to talk about on the next slide. As the lead of our business testers, we need to set the direction, build and communicate a plan, give them ongoing guidance and support, and coach them to success, just like the female coach did with her soccer team. She set the direction, she built and communicated the plan by running them through the drills, she was on the field giving them guidance and support, and she continued to coach them to success. Well, my coach just looked really overwhelmed, confused, and wasn't sure what to do with these little boys. And that's where I really started to realize I need to be more like the coach of the other team rather than the coach of my son's team. So how do we do that? First, we need to set the direction. And I found that writing big, long, 50-page test plans and handing it to my business testers and saying, read this and digest it, and you'll know everything about testing, has not worked. It was much the same as giving every kid a ball, showing them how to kick it, and then taking it away when the game started. I found that working through presentation styles, like PowerPoint presentation, like you're watching now, is a much easier way to do it. It gives them a quick snapshot of their overall vision and plan, walks them through the test process, the schedule, gives me a good opportunity to set expectations. And I rerun a subset of these slides at the beginning of each test cycle. So if you're running on a waterfall project or even on an agile one, just to go through it every time, just to remind everyone. It's a good format for them being able to answer questions about the material as they see it as you're presenting it. It also gives them an easy, quick takeaway in the form of the slide deck that they can run through later as a reference. So this has really helped set the direction for the teams and help them understand where we're going to go with our testing. The next is to build and communicate the plan, and you may be working with your business to help build the plan, especially if they're being brought in to do not just UAT, but to do testing through the entire life cycle of the project. And I've often done this through workshops rather than, again, a big test document. So working through workshops to work with my business, especially if we're building the scope, to work through our business scenario definition. So what is it that we're planning to test? And looking at that through an application breakdown, working through some day-in-the-life scenarios, remembering to work at our system integrations, and then also any business process integration. So here's where you start to speak the business's language rather than the testing language. You need to start to dig into their world and what their application looks like for them in order to have them help you build this. So a lot of the guidance is going to come from you, but a lot of the information is going to come from them, and that's why a workshop style works best. We're also going to be doing workshops for testing scope. So whether that's writing user stories for testing or we're looking at traditional test scripts or application checklists, we're going to start to build that out of our business scenario definition. And here's where workshopping with the groups of your business testers really works well. You can do some samples on your own, work with them as a group, and get them started on this, and then during the course of the workshop, let them do some of this on their own with your guidance, so that when you do send them away with whatever the templates are that you've worked together to build, because you want to build a template with them so they understand the purpose behind it and they've given input into it, so that they can go away from the workshop and continue to define further test scope on their own. A workshop works great because you can work hands-on with the people that may be struggling, and then really oversee the people that may be getting it, and even pair some business testers up together with a person that's really understanding how this works with one that may be struggling a bit in that same area. We're also going to do workshops for testing process, and here is the only point where I see training of testing to be valuable, which is when you want to be training them on a test case management tool or a defect management tool. If you're using something like Quality Center or a Rational Suite, you'll want to be training them on how that works and how they can use it. That's really the only point where you may be doing training. It's not valuable to do training on what is testing and how is it going to work overall from an industry standard. More on the workshop side as far as how testing for this project. What is our test scope for this project that's important? But workshops for test case management tools and defect management tools to help bring everyone on the same page, help to understand how we'll use the product that we're using to manage our test cases or our defects, and really working with our business testers so that they understand how to use those tools. Next, workshop for test execution. So typically on the first day of test execution on my teams, I'll bring all of my testers in together into a room. So this requires setting up a test lab or having a bunch of workstations nearby that you can all work in to run through test execution as a group, just so that they see how it works. I'm not making any assumptions here and just sending them away to run test scripts. I want to have everyone in the same room so that we can work through some together. So typically bring up our very first test, whether it's a test script or a checklist or user story, and walk through how we will test that as a group so that everyone can see what my expectations are for testing, how testing will go, and they can ask questions at that time and really get a good feel for what's going on. They get comfortable with how testing will look. And then in the course of that workshop, setting them loose to do some on their own. So working through the one as a group, and then after we've done a few and they're starting to feel comfortable, then turning them loose on the system with whatever areas that they'll be testing, and working with them throughout the rest of the workshop to provide any additional guidance or help before turning them back to their own workspaces or their desks and saying, okay, continue on with this. So again, I'm not just giving them a bunch of test scripts or a bunch of checklists and saying, okay, go. I'm walking them through it slowly so that they can get introduced to what's happening. Next, we also look at doing retrospectives. So at the end of each test phase, whether that's a 2-week cycle if you're on an agile team, or if that's a month-long cycle if you're more on a waterfall team, or even if it's more than a month long, having a retrospective at some point where you can go back and say, what should we start doing because we weren't and we need to start looking at doing this? What should we stop doing because it's hindering our testing? What would we like to continue to do because it's working well? And just looking at those 3 points to really see where we want to take things for the next phase so we can improve, we can get people more comfortable with what we're doing, and we're not just doing the same thing that's not working. We want to stop that and see what we can do as a team better for the next phase. And a lot of this is all done through workshops. So even though you've done the workshops with a group, they may still require some individual guidance. And I've often done one-on-one sessions with people that I've seen struggle or people that have had questions out of the workshops to continue to drill down on the business scenario definition or the test scope or even with test execution. We may do the big workshop session, but there's still a few people in the room that are struggling. So sitting down with them, doing some paired testing, maybe pairing them up with one of the stronger business people or even myself, pairing them up with myself, and I run through their testing while they're watching. And we talk about what it is that I'm doing, what it is that I'm watching for and seeing, what I'm noting that seems to be not what I'm expecting, and all of that kind of stuff so that they can have more experience and more exposure to testing actually happening if they're struggling with this. Same with the test scope and the business scenario definition, continuing to work one-on-one with people that may be struggling to help this become a little bit easier for them and they can learn a little bit more about what it is they need to do in this role. Lastly, they're going to require some continuous support. So follow-up and communication. This will help you strengthen the relationships. We're going to continue to manage expectations of what they can expect from you, what you can expect from them, what they can expect to see from the system as we go. And just to do this frequently, face-to-face is better, but I realize if you've got a distributed team, that may not always work. So an email touch point or even just a conference call during the day or during the week to say, how's it going? What's happening? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you stuck in any way? Do we need to have another workshop in an area where a lot of people are struggling? Do we need to do some more one-on-one time in an area that an individual may be struggling? And just to continue to remind myself, especially because I forget this, to use their business speak and not my tester speak because it helps with the communication aspect of things. And to keep my documentation lightweight. But I found as soon as I've gone to the lightweight presentation style of documentation, I haven't wanted to go back to those long test plans and documents. So if you can move into more of that direction, it's easy to keep it lightweight because you'll be very busy with the support aspect of leading business testers that you won't have a lot of time to make big long documents to document what you've been doing. So the PowerPoint I found has really worked great. Even in the follow-up and communication phase where we may be going off the path that I'd originally set and may need a refresher on what our defect management process is or how to use our test case management tool or what our initial scope was or where we want to go with this. So I've always been creating a little subset of PowerPoint decks that I keep reminding people of and refreshing them with to keep it as lightweight as possible so that it's easy reference for them. Because if they are balancing testing and their full-time job, they won't have the time to read a lot of large documentation. So it sounds like a lot of work, this leading business testers, and it absolutely is. But there are some benefits to you as the leader. You'll gain new insight into your business. And this is especially important if this is an organization that you're an employee of or that you'll be working with for a long time. Because not only will you learn more about your product, you'll learn more about your users of your product, and you're going to build a lot of great relationships that can pay off in the future. If your organization decides to start using testers and you've got a buffer between you and your business, you're going to have some contacts that you can likely reach out to in the future, if they're on your project or not, to say, hey, you're really smart in this one area of my business, and I've got some questions for you in the future. Can I leverage you and talk to you? Because you've built great relationships and a trust there with leading your teams, it's absolutely something that you can leverage going forward. I've also found that for myself it's been surprising and a rewarding experience because I've seen areas of the various businesses that I've been in that I would have never seen as a tester, typically something my business analyst would have seen. So I've been taking on tours of electrical control system centers. I've seen how natural gas is stored in the ground. I've seen how transmission lines run across the entire western half of Canada. This is stuff I would have never seen and never had the chance to tour, sit with operators during the day as they run the power system for half of Canada. And it was really neat to see how my software was working in the real world. And I know that's not something I would have seen if I would have been just a member of the test team. So it can be really neat, some of the stuff that you can see and some of the projects that you can be part of and learn how software controls our world. For me, it's been really rewarding, even though it's a lot of work at times. So in summary, just to always remember the 5 facts because they're really going to help you build out your plan. So remembering that business testers aren't testers. They don't want to be testers. They're going to need a lot of guidance and support. They're going to require management of their expectations. And finally, they probably have a full-time job, and you're going to have to work within whatever requirement is that they've got for that full-time job. So remember to use lightweight documentation and in-person communication because that's the best for the time that you'll have with them. And always to remember the reason your organization uses business testers because at the times that you feel really frustrated about the amount of work that it is, about not having business testers as much as you were promised up front, to remember why your organization uses business testers, helps to overcome the frustrations that I've found. And to really embrace the benefits to you as a leader. It is lots of work, but there's a lot of neat benefits. You build some great relationships. You meet some people in the business that you wouldn't have gotten to meet before. And you may get to see how your software is used in all the various ways of the business by getting tours of areas, working with people during the day as they do their job, all sorts of things. It's been really neat for me. Just before we go to the questions, I just want to bring up references page. Here's some of the references that I used for building this, and just references that I use for leading business test teams. So Becoming a Technical Leader with Jerry Weinberg. If you haven't heard of Jerry before, definitely check him out. He's got a lot of great material on testing, on development, on people, on software projects. So he's a great resource there. Behind Closed Doors is a great book on secrets of great management, not just for leading business testers, but management overall. And then a couple of fun books that just really spoke to me when I read them. Who Moved My Cheese, which is about dealing with change. So especially on software projects, we see a lot of change, and it's great just for keeping a clear head on dealing with change. And then The Fred Factor, which is just a book on how to be a great employee and how to be just a great consultant or contractor, and how to really motivate people to do the same. So for me, it was a really good one, especially when the project gets tough. It's a good one to remember on how to keep my positive attitude and keep plugging away. So now we have time for some questions.
Now, Nancy, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and I see we have some questions already.
Yes.
Now, let's see. Do you want to read out the questions, Nancy?
Yeah, so the first one is, how about virtual teams and kickoff sessions across the globe? So the team that I'm on right now is a virtual team. We have people that are based in Western Canada, where I am, in Eastern Canada, in the United States. We also have people based in India as well. So for virtual teams, we'll use a live meeting like we are today in a conference bridge, exactly like this presentation was today. So putting together live meetings, doing the presentation exactly how we did today so that teams can be all connected works really, really well. Next question is it recommended to have business testers in the project as a must-have or a good to-have? Absolutely. On projects where I haven't been mandated to use business testers, I have brought in a few people, and quite early on in the project, just because I wanted their feedback before we hit UAT. I didn't want any surprises when we only had 2 weeks before go live for them to be looking in there. So I have brought people in for a phase that I've called early business testing, where after my professional testers have looked at the product, bring the business testers in. Typically this is fairly informal, just to bring them in for maybe a couple hours in an afternoon into my test environment, just to play with the various areas of the system where we've done stuff. And again, to really set expectations with them coming in to say, here's what you can expect to see working, here's where we know there's some problems, and here's what doesn't work at all. So they don't go back to their desk panicked that they saw the product and it doesn't work well. And I've learned that it does bring some really good feedback up close. We've noticed some things that the testers had missed. We got some feedback about requirements that had started to change just based on what they saw. So getting that up front really helped gear the team to not continue down a path that we were maybe straying down incorrectly and course correct as we went. Another question here. How do you overcome problems with people not wanting to be business testers? That is definitely a tough one. What we've done in the past is to really work with my project manager on that. You have to, again, you can't manage the people, you need to influence them. So working with the business tester that doesn't want to be there to find out more about them as a person. Going back to saying, well, what do you do in the business every day? What is the piece of software that you've really found frustrating before? What do you like about the software? And just to get to learn about who they are and what they like to do that drives their passion for their job every day, and then start to work that into what it is we'll be testing. So maybe I've had them slotted for one area of the application, but I learned they really enjoy this other one, starting to maybe shift their focus into that one. If it's somebody that really doesn't like even their day-to-day job, and now they have to do testing on top of it, that's going to be a tough one, and you may need to leverage your project manager to identify that as a risk to the project.
Now, Nancy, I think that's all the questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much for a great presentation, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And just to remind you that our next webinar takes place tomorrow at 10 a.m. CET, and it's with AJ Balamurukadaz, and he is going to be speaking about weekend testing. And if you still want to register for this, just visit our homepage. And if you would like to register for this year's conference, please visit our website for more details also. Finally, I'd like to remind you that all of this webinar has been recorded, and we will email you once it is available in the EuroSTAR webinar archive. Thank you for listening. This webinar has now ended.